Here's a question. Why is my husband sinking into denial? Well, I don't know the details about your husband, so I can't make a responsible comment about him. But I do know in general terms why so many American men and other Western men are wallowing in denial and have been for decades. Most of us are guilty of playing with denial when we should be using our most honest powers of observation to face reality. And we're just simply not doing it. And here's why I think we do this. We don't want to face the hardships of responsible living because responsibility is just plain hard. And so we take the easy road made easy for us by our culture, which likes us men to be soft and docile and passive. And this is really easy because we were largely emasculated by the school system and told to keep our heads down while we were there, and also by the conformity culture when we got out. We were told that other more capable beings like benevolent bureaucrats would do all the responsible hard things for us, including predestinating the future, planning the economy, writing us endless welfare checks and bailout checks, taking care of our kids in the school system with school buses and lunches and everything else, or paying for our abortions if we didn't want to have children. In short, taking all the risks out of life in return for our total compliance to a life with no real freedom. And so this is who we are right now. Your husband is probably in a similar category. Now, we don't always deny that there's danger out there, but most of the time, that's really the easy way out. If things start to get hard, we get, we have a depression bearing down on us. We have riots in the streets. We have a pandemic. We have these enforced lockdowns. The easiest thing for us to do, because we're so good at it, is just to turn to escapism and passivity. And in the process, we get really, really good at denial. Now, here's some examples. We spend beyond our means, and we pretend the debt will never come due. And that's denial. We consume more than we produce, and we pretend that we will never be in want. And that's denial, too. And so, yes, I understand that many wives are wide awake to the trouble on the horizon. And life would be hard enough if both husband and wife were working together to rebuild their lives during today's depression. But for a wife to have to do it alone while the husband tells her from the couch where he's binge watching on sports, look, honey, don't be such a conspiracy theorist. The government's going to print more money and we'll go on welfare or something, or there's supposed to be this universal guaranteed income of something or somehow. And this is, I feel sorry for wives who have to put up with that. As Charles Murray pointed out in his book, Losing Ground, men have been depending on women to make life work for a long time. And men let women have all the responsibility. And when they do that, according to this book, this study that Murray did, both sink slowly into poverty. That's what's happened. Okay, so where are we? I have a question for you now, you wives, you who wrote in, and those of you who are thinking the very same thing, having a similar problem. If your husband actually believes that there's no serious problem with our bankrupt economy and that the government will make everything good somehow, he is in denial. So the question for you is, how will you respond to this? Nagging won't help. If you say, hey, honey, the world's falling apart, do something, we're all gonna die. Now, it's hard for a statement or a demand or a reproach or whatever you might want to call that statement. It's hard to respond to that. Instead, I have a suggestion. Please try to do this. Quietly start finding out yourself who's really out there in the community, kickstarting the rebuilding process in your neighborhood or even your broader neighborhood or your community. Who are the responsible men who see the dangers coming? Now, I've noticed in almost every community there are some men who are doing this. They're they're going around looking for the problem, seeing how they can make a weak community or a welfare-based community, which most of our small local communities are even in cities, in the suburbs. We've been so focused on a welfare-based mentality and how we're governed. We're really weak, but there are some men out there, and they're usually older men, who are beginning to try to figure out how can we solve this problem and strengthen what's weak. So if you can put your ear to the ground or something and try to find out who these men are, then start doing what you can to help these men. And then after you've done that, tell your husband what you found, and start inviting your husband as respectfully as you can to join that effort. It's really an important effort that's going on in the community. And so if there's something you can do to communicate even a little bit of respect and confidence in your husband, you will be amazed at how far that can go to give him a new identity as someone who is actually needed and trusted to be something other than the toxic male on the scene, which, certainly is something that all of us have been hearing for way too long. And your husband probably is too. If you speak respectfully about him to others and lay off the dopey husband jokes and the dumb dad jokes, things may change in your home. Now, I'm not promising this isn't a formula that's going to work for everybody, but I've seen enough homes where wives who've been observant and they've been wise, and they got a pretty serious problem with a husband who is in denial. They've done something like this, and it's really begun to help. I've seen men begin to act responsibly when people begin to look to them for responsible actions, especially their wives. Men really need, I don't know why this is, but we really thrive on respect from our wives. And most of us aren't all that respectable, but when wives just start feeding this to us, it can tend to make us a little bit more respectable. Okay? I've seen boys act like men when they are treated like adults by their moms and by their sisters. Quick story in our family. My two daughters had an annoying little brother. He was really an annoying little brother. And they kind of treated him that way. But he was getting older and older, and all three of them were interested in music composition, high-level music composition. And the little brother was trying his hand at it, and he wasn't very good at it, and they certainly let him know that, right? But once they had a talk with each other and decided, if we just treat him a little bit differently, maybe he will change. And they started doing that. And they started encouraging him in what he was doing. They weren't all in competition for who could be the best. They encouraged him. They spoke encouraging words to him. They began to treat him more like an adult, like a real professional, and he started doing really professional work. And he, finally even surpassed them in their ability, which was at a very high level, and became a professional composer on his own. And I think part of that, I think those daughters get, his sisters, I think, get credit for the ways that they began to speak to him and nurture him by just treating him differently and treating him like a real adult and like a professional adult. It had an influence on him. And once your husband begins to get out there in the community and begins to help somewhere, anywhere, even with something really small in the neighborhood, he can see what it feels like to be on the left of bang, where the wisdom is, where the men assemble themselves, where the real men hang out. Now let me explain that phrase to you, that term, left of bang. Imagine, if you will, a timeline, going left to right, and bang is an event that happens that's some sort of really dangerous, destructive thing, like an IED or a bomb or something that goes off, or a depression that starts. The phrase comes from the Marine Corps Combat Hunter Program, and there's a book by that name. And so if you imagine this timeline moving left to right, a crisis happens right here, and that's the bang. Everything on this side is to the left of bang. and everything on the other side is to the right of bang. And so what happens is, once a crisis happens, people on the right of bang everyone has to scramble and try to come up with a solution to how to deal with it. But and that's only when they get involved. But those with foresight are doing things over here on to the left of bang, surveying the timeline to the left of the crisis, knowing that a crisis could hit, and so they're doing things before things get bad, before things come apart, before a community finds itself without food, medicine, water, or neighborhood security. And a lot of Americans can see what could happen in our, to our economy, to our food supply chain. Some of these things have already started happening in 2020. Growing crime and anarchy, and they're taking note that neighborhood crime, it's actually up now at the time of this recording, some 12%, and that the government will never be able to come to the rescue, all right? Especially in the so-called autonomy zones being controlled by outlaws that are being created around the country. Now is the time for your neighborhood to be organized for your own security and working to resource supplies for this coming winter. This is to the left of bang, because things really could get worse somewhere over here in the future. Team efforts will make the community come alive and could return your community to a condition America enjoyed during the first Great Depression. There was just a lot of teamwork. Families looked out for each other. The communities took care of each other. People were exhilarated by the adventure of what was going on. And creative building is always more fulfilling than mindless consumption of brainless American entertainment. If we could just get the men out there to taste what that's like, I think that would really change many of them. And I have seen that happen to some men who they've set the folly aside. They've put away their toys, and they want to try to be more responsible in the community. And this is where the solutions to your family's vulnerability may come from: an active community of dynamic leaders putting the new economy together. So get networked with the men who are doing it now, then try to inspire your husband to join in. Reality is a whole lot more grounding than fantasy. And that's the best answer I can give you right now.
If you like content like this, please consider subscribing. If you know others who would benefit from this material, please share it with them.